COVID-19 vaccine question and answer session, where we will be discussing some frequently asked questions about the COVID-19 vaccine with a panel of our wonderful physicians. My name is Scott Kohlmeyer, and I'm a clinical pharmacist here at Covenant Healthcare, and I will be moderating this panel today. I am joined by a group of physicians that have graciously offered up their time and their wisdom to share with everyone. I will let each of them introduce themselves. That way I don't miss any credentials or anything like that. We can start with you, Dr. Haddad.
Nicholas Haddad. I'm an infectious disease physician. I work for CMU, and I've been intimately involved with the COVID pandemic so far in the 3 hospitals we're out of.
Dr. Wagner.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo Wagner. I'm the Chief Academic Officer and DIO at CMU. I'm also an emergency physician. In fact, pardon my outfit, just finished my shift a few minutes ago.
Dr. Mena Khan.
Hi, I am Mena Khan. I am the Assistant Director of Medical Simulation here, and I am a trial participant in the Moderna vaccine trial. It's nice to be with you all.
And thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you being able to answer some of these really frequently asked questions today. So right off the top, I think the question that comes to mind for a lot of people is, are the 3 of you going to be getting the vaccine? And what has made you decide to do that for yourselves? Dr. Haddad?
Start with that. Yeah. It's definitely a benefit for us seeing patients to have a strong tool to prevent the infection. The way I thought about this for a while is approached it with objective assessment, and the data so far are showing safety and efficacy are both shown in the studies. So that made me more comfortable taking the vaccine. Another way I looked at it is, instead of getting the actual full-fledged, ugly, spiky virus, I really wanted a small part of it that would make me produce my own immunity. So I told the residents I would rather have the small part of the virus, a tiny manufactured part. It's not even a live part. And this way I would be immune.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Wagner?
Absolutely anxious to get the vaccination. You know, as I said, I work in the emergency department. I see how dangerous and severe this disease is. We see the patients with some of the worst disease, but we also just see the patients who have continued to have symptoms for an extended period of time. It's really affected a lot of lives, a lot of families. And so anything I feel I can do to help slow that down and to protect myself and my family, to be personal about it.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Mena Khan had kind of a unique experience in that she was able to participate in one of the clinical trials for the vaccine. So what made you decide to be a participant, and kind of talk about your story a little bit?
Sure, I'll just answer the first question. So because I am part of the Moderna vaccine trial, which is a double-blinded study, and it's up to about 15 months long. I don't know for a fact yet, as of yet, if I got the vaccine or if I was a part of the placebo arm. In my sort of thought process, I believe I did get it. If I did not get it, Moderna does come out and will let us know within the coming weeks, then I'm still eligible to receive it. So I want to put that out there. And yes, I would absolutely get it. So my story with that is I just decided in about August, what can I do to help? Public service has always been a part of my family growing up. I volunteered on election day to be a poll worker because I knew that we were like low on older people volunteering. So I thought I could do this, and I reached out to Henry Ford's Moderna people and didn't think I'd get a response, but they said we're still at about 20,000 people, and I thought, all right, I'll take it from here. And that's when I decided to consult with friends, colleagues, family members. And once I felt comfortable, I decided this is the way I'm going to do my little part.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. So we kind of talked a little bit about why you guys feel comfortable about getting the vaccine, but why should everyone else also be getting this vaccine? we can go with Dr. Haddad first.
So there's a pandemic, a big one, and it's caused a lot of damage, a lot of lost lives. And if it does continue like that, unabated, we will end up with a huge human toll. The only highly effective means to combat is to cut this chain of transmission, and a vaccine produces immunity. We know from previous experiences, whether in influenza or whether in measles or even smallpox, how effective vaccination is to cut that chain of transmission. If we do that, we will be way better off. We will save lives. We will remove masks, hopefully soon.
Thank you. Anything else either Dr. Khan or Dr. Wagner would like to add?
So again, I think a lot of people may not have seen somebody who's really had the severe effects, but I like to reemphasize to my family and to my friends that it's not just the people with severe effects. This is a horrible disease. Somewhere between 1 and 2 and 100 people die from it. But much more important to me, and the reason for us to have the vaccine and take the risk for the vaccine, is because about 10 to 15% of people are really having the long-term effects of this. You know, my own niece has had symptoms for 3 months, and she was never hypoxic. She was never needing to go to a hospital, and yet she's continued to have it. There's several different studies that talk about people who truly didn't even know they had the disease, like college athletes, and they did an MRI of their heart, and they found that almost 50% of them had some change during the time that they had the tested positive, even though they had 0 symptoms at all. So I think you have to weigh risk and benefit of all of these sort of diseases and the vaccine. And to me, the risk of the disease is very much higher than the risk of the vaccination.
Yeah. Dr. Khan, anything to add?
Nothing to add. I echo that. This is an international global problem, and this is our solution at this point. And I feel comfortable with the idea of the vaccine and the process that it went through. So I encourage not just the healthcare workers, but when it comes public to, you know, the general public, to absolutely get it. But for the same reason Dr. Haddad and Dr. Wagner said.
I think it's important here also to shed light on this unique virus. It's not a common cold. It's not the flu. It's a virus that affects the brain, the lungs. It affects the olfactory cells, which are where we breathe or where we actually smell and taste. It's a vasculopathic virus in our terms, meaning it affects blood vessels. It's a coagulopathic virus, meaning it causes clotting. It causes COVID toes. It causes COVID brain. I mean, like Dr. Wagner mentioned, it's the long haulers, but it's also the acute disease that is devastating. It is not the flu.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just want to add also to like sort of reassure everyone. I know it's worrisome and there's some skepticism, but if you really read the paperwork, the research, and the timeline and what's transpired regarding this vaccine, I'm sure many of you will feel comfortable. A lot of what you're hearing is hearsay, media, misinformation. So I want to say that as well.
So kind of on the side of the vaccine, so what are the vaccines that are available right now, or maybe soon within a week or so? And then also, you know, in that, you know, their mRNA vaccines, how does mRNA work? How do mRNA vaccines work? I'll point that to Dr. Haddad first, I think.
So folks are concerned that it's new technology. It really is not completely new. The reason we are using it right now is we have the vehicle to transmit a stable mRNA from the vaccine inside the cell, which is the liposomal vacuole, which basically is a vehicle to make it stable. Messenger RNA technology has been used since the 2000s, whether in cancer treatment or other viral infections such as Zika, flu, CMV, EBV. The beauty of it is it's not actually part of the virus itself. It's part of the genetic code of the virus, and it does not go inside our nuclear cell or the nucleus to change our own genetic material. It gets processed inside the cytoplasm, outside of the nucleus, and it just disintegrates afterwards. The way it works, it induces formation of the protein of the virus itself. When the protein that is made by our own body is exposed to our own immune cells, these immune cells self-activate to produce cells that are active specifically against that part of the virus and produce antibodies. So there are two mechanisms to combat it, and it's a really novel way of inducing immunity. So it looks safe from the studies that were published last week in the New England Journal of Medicine. The mechanism is very clearly explained. The side effects are explained. I feel it's a safe vaccine and it's an effective vaccine.
If I can paraphrase a scientist that I heard within the last week, basically the mRNA, the M stands for messenger, the messenger brings in essentially a picture of the vaccine. So they phrased it as this picture, which is like a wanted poster. They tell your cell, this is the bad guy on this wanted poster. I want you to make something that will recognize this bad guy. Your own cell does that. And then this picture just vanishes. It degrades because it goes away. So my daughter says, just like Snapchat, right? They should see the picture and then it vanishes. So it's really not something entering your body. It's not the virus itself, but it basically tells your body how to make something to recognize this. So when this comes, your body already recognizes it and stops it before it becomes a disease.
Yeah. That's a great way of looking at it. I like that.
I took that from some scientists, so I can't claim credit.
No, it's great. Anything to add, Dr. Khan?
No, I'll leave that to the infectious disease expert.
Dr. Haddad did a great job of explaining as well. Thank you. So, you know, something that a lot of people have on their mind as they're thinking about this vaccine is that it came about very quickly. You know, some people say it's rushed, and how quickly it was developed and approved and rolled out and all that. How were they able to move this along so quickly? And why do you feel comfortable that it wasn't rushed? It was, you know, given the appropriate amount of time, but even though it was fast. Dr. Wagner?
So, you know, as Dr. Haddad said, they've been working on the basic principle of this vaccine for a really long time. It's been 20 years that they've been working on this principle. So the original research has been going on for quite some time. Then what needed to happen is the studies needed to be done very quickly. The more patients you have with any specific problem, the faster it is to do a study. So though it has been terrible that we have so many people with COVID, that actually helped speed up the studies because you could test something against all of the disease that's in the community. They did all of the stages of the FDA research that's required before the FDA took a look at this, and they didn't really skip any steps. They clearly have recognized that we would love to sit and study what happens to the vaccine for 2 or 3 years, but because this disease is so bad, you don't have that part of the process. That's the only part of the process that's really sped up. All of the rest of it was able to be done efficiently because there was financial and community support for this. People like Dr. Khan who volunteered to get this so that we can try it. Normally it takes a really long time to get people enrolled in these studies, and everybody recognized how important this was. So it's not really so fast as everybody feels like. It just, everybody came together to do the right things to speed up what is normally a much more, a slower process.
To tag upon this, I think you're right on. It's important to remember that government processes are lengthy, not because they are indeed lengthy, because there's a bureaucratic process that goes on. Right now with the COVID vaccine, everything was put aside and expedited to concentrate on this. The money was available, the steps were shortened, and everything else was kept aside to focus on this. It does not mean corners were cut. In fact, all the safety procedures were followed, and all the requirements were indeed followed. There was phase 1, there was phase 2 until phase 3. So with all of that, it does not mean expediting, meaning cutting corners. They are not equivalent in this setting.
Yeah,
it's a great thing to highlight. And that's why I felt comfortable sort of being a part of phase 3. And I really don't think anything would be made for public use despite our pandemic if it was deemed unsafe at this point. So.
Yeah, I think another part is also the manufacturing process was overlapped with the testing. So the manufacturers were actually making the vaccine far in advance, and most of that is because of the extra dollars that were available to them to kind of speed up that part of the process. So you kind of had the steps weren't skipped, but they kind of overlapped on each other more than they normally would.
Exactly. I always say, you know, you are going to sell cookies. You wouldn't necessarily make thousands of batches of cookies before you decided if the recipe was any good, because it wouldn't be profitable. You couldn't do that normally, but the federal government said, we will buy these cookies whether they're good or bad. So please start making them as we're doing the tests. So normally it takes a really long time after you decide something works to make it. And we were able to do this because of the support that people had. So that's been great. Could have taken a really long time to now manufacture things, and instead, once we knew it was safe, we could get it right away.
In fact, Pfizer started working on this vaccine on January 10th, which was the first date that a first case was described in the United States. So they didn't wait for that pandemic to occur. That had started even before. I think they had the foresight to see it coming and started working on it together with the BioNTech, which is a German company, smaller.
I believe the same is true with Moderna as well. They were, you know, I think within days of the genetic sequence of the virus being released, they had mRNA ready to be tested. So, yeah, it's.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Dr. Gunn.
Provides any reassurance to people. Maybe Dr. Wagner already distributed the Q&A or it's been distributed to the staff of Covenant, but I really like the little diagram that I looked at. So maybe that can be attached and sent if it hasn't already been. So if people want to see where the steps overlapped and not that they were missed or we cut corners or they cut corners, but how the process was able to happen. So obviously.
And Dr. Khan, I believe, is talking about the Operation Warp Speed diagram that is available online. And we can also link to that on Covenant as well, just to make sure everybody can see what the steps were and how they overlapped and why it was able to be done in a short amount of time. So, anything else to add?
You know, I'm pretty excited that this came from Michigan. Actually, Pfizer here in Michigan was one of the companies that is coming out with it. So I feel even more comfortable because I know it's people that are like us who are doing this, building this for us. So I think that makes me feel even more comfortable about the vaccine that we're getting.
Yeah, it's been very cool seeing the news, you know, in Kalamazoo, Michigan every night, waiting for the shipments. Did you have anything, Dr. Khan?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think reassurance is there if they're transparent, everything that's happening and anything that I'm reading. Companies are being very transparent, as is the government, CDC, FDA. So if you want to look at the data and research and everything that's being done, it's there. So that's reassuring to me, at least.
Yeah, I think that actually rolls nicely into kind of the next question is, you know, looking at the data, how effective are these vaccines, and what are some of the short-term and are there long-term side effects that we know about? Anything kind of looking at the studies that have come out so far, what do we know about it? Dr. Haddad?
Yeah, so the Pfizer study, which was again published, looked at almost 18,500 in each arm. One received the saline shot and one received the actual vaccination. Nobody knew that it was administered, neither the administrator nor the patient. So it's called double blind. Out of the vaccine recipients, there were 6 cases of COVID. Out of the placebo recipients, there was 162. And that's where the number 95% efficacy comes from. And that's after administration of the second dose 3 weeks later. So a week after the second dose is where we noted the efficacy to be mostly present. Of course, we believe some of the immunity starts forming after the first dose, but we we definitely have to get both vaccines or both doses for efficacy to occur. As far as side effects, maybe I'll have Dr. Wagner talk about that, but I would like to comment on the fact that the Pfizer study was actually designed to unveil side effects down to the 1 out of 10,000. So 0.01% is the detection rate for side effects for the Pfizer vaccine. Some astute listeners would say, oh, of course, so after using it on millions of people afterwards, we may find other side effects, and the answer would be surely yes. This is very common in vaccinology. We know that any vaccine may have a serious side effect in 1 out of a million or 1 out of 2 millions. So yes, this might occur with COVID, but so far the side effects are very mundane. Dr. Wagner?
Yeah, so the side effects are basically similar to what you get with a lot of vaccines. Many people will get some discomfort of your arm, you know, how you kind of say, oh, you know, my arm's sore and the muscle is sore. With the first shot, very few people get essentially any side effects other than that. Less than 4% even get things like muscle aches or headaches, and a very small percent, less than 1%, get a low-grade fever with that. With the second shot, your body already recognizes this, and so it has a bigger reaction. Almost everybody complained of arm pain, like I say, just like we all do when we get the flu vaccine, for instance. About half of the people sort of felt fatigue and headaches. About a third or so started having muscle aches and chills, and about 1 in 7 had a low-grade fever. The rest of the study that just came out, as he mentioned, that was published, showed that almost all of these symptoms were gone within 24 to 48 hours. And there were none of those really serious side effects that we sometimes worry about with vaccinations. So that's pretty exciting also. So it does feel like you got something, and I'd love to hear from Mina, who may or may not have gotten a real vaccine, but it seems like she probably did based on some of the symptoms she got.
Yeah, so just like Dr. Wagner perfectly said, after the first shot, again, not knowing placebo or trial arm, the next day, 24 hours later, I had arm pain. After the second shot, which was 3 to 4 weeks later, 28 days, I believe, I started having that same arm pain within 3 hours instead of 24. And then I had quite, I'd say, vigorous sort of flu-like symptoms, chills, fevers, rigors, muscle aches, body pain that lasted about 48 hours. And as soon as they were over, though, I mean, the situation was transient and fleeting. I've had no issues since. So.
So after getting the, you know, either a placebo or a vaccine, obviously you would repeat that, you would do it again in a heartbeat?
I do, after looking at some of the data from other participants and how many people had sort of a vigorous response or not as vigorous, I think I had a pretty active and strong response. And despite that, absolutely, I would do it again, yes.
Great.
One relevant point here to mention is that in the study that was recently published, the folks who were 55 years of age or more, so the older recipients, had actually less side effect profile than the younger ones. Now, that's not to discourage the younger ones of getting it, but the percentage was slightly better for the older people. So that's to encourage everybody to embrace it.
Anything else to add from anyone else on the topic of efficacy or safety?
Yeah, I probably just want to add to sort of put it out there for anyone that's concerned. I am a physician, but I did go into this trial completely voluntarily as a private citizen. Had nothing to do with my sort of background. Maybe my science background was the impetus to sort of learn and understand and how I can do my part. But it's important to put that out there because I have heard, you know, there's some sort of, you know, compensation I got or sort of incentive, and it was none of that is true. I entirely did this voluntarily, and I seeked out the trial, and so I want to put that out there because I did this on my own accord.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks from all of us.
Yeah. I think another question that comes up sometimes is, are there any people that should be concerned about getting the vaccine? Are there any contraindications for the people who shouldn't get this vaccine? What does the CDC or other organizations say about special populations getting the vaccine?
Well, I can start. The one question that I've really studied, because a lot of people have asked me, are people who are pregnant women. And in these trials, there have not been a lot of pregnant women. There were, in fact, 23 of them that were in the Pfizer study. I understand about the same number were in Moderna, though that data isn't completely out. So that's not really enough to make a difference. There's been a lot of statements by the societies for maternal fetal medicine and for OB. The latest data that I saw in the last day or two recommends that if you are in your first trimester of pregnancy, that if you are of a normal risk, that you may want to not get the vaccine because the fever is something that you don't want to get during that first trimester. On the other hand, when you have COVID and you're pregnant, it is much more serious. Pregnancy is one of those sort of serious risk factors for COVID and getting disease that is very concerning. And so what the recommendation is that you talk with your physicians about it. But a lot of statements are that the disease is so bad that the vaccine is probably worthwhile after your first trimester. I would never tell anybody to do that at this point because we just don't have the data, but that's what is being recommended by the national associations. So talk to your physicians. I think Dr. Haddad can talk about sort of the other populations.
To tag on pregnancy, in the context of vaccinology, we do not vaccinate pregnant women with live viruses. That's a contraindication. And live viruses are very few: measles, mumps, rubella, yellow fever. COVID is not a live virus. So intuitively, it should be okay. We just don't have the data. Now, the way I think about it is if somebody asks me as a patient, I would say if they are at risk, such as an ICU nurse seeing COVID patients, then I would take the vaccination risk rather than the disease risk. But if somebody is pregnant at home, not seeing anybody, maybe wait. That's how I would look at it. As far as the other population is, we know it's safe in well-controlled HIV patients, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and the general population. Anybody 16 and above with no significant immune problems. If somebody has immune problems, whether that's a disease that's immunocompromising or a cancer treatment, then at this point, we do not have information to advise them whether to get vaccinated or not. These studies are ongoing.
Anything else to add from anyone?
I think the new finding that we've had since we've started vaccinating came from Britain with the allergic reaction. So if people have had a severe allergic reaction, anaphylaxis, meaning somebody had to, you had to go to the hospital, you had to get epinephrine, your blood pressure was very low, your breathing was so bad that we either had to put you on a ventilator or were worried about that. Those people, they're recommending not get this vaccine until we have a little more data with it. For people who have normal allergies to medications where they may get a rash or they may have some stomach symptoms, those sort of things, that's not the contraindication that we're talking about. So those people are fine. And it's pretty rare for those folks who have had very serious allergic reactions. Those folks should talk to their physician.
Two rules of thumb here, and I appreciate what you just said, Dr. Wagner. The first rule of thumb is if somebody has severe allergies that they have to carry an EpiPen with them, we need to think about giving them the vaccine at this point. The second rule of thumb is the FDA gave a recommendation that if somebody's allergic to the components in the vaccine, they shouldn't get it. And maybe Scott, you can weigh in on what the vaccine contains that would make it contraindicated for certain people.
Yeah, so right now they're still investigating fully. The thought right now is that it was the polyethylene glycol component that might have contributed to this, which is PEG for short. It's commonly used in quite a few medications as well as other vaccines. And so if you have an allergic reaction to this, or that component, then you would be contraindicated for receiving the vaccine. But again, it's in a lot of other things, and you would likely know already if you were someone who had an allergic reaction to polyethylene glycol. The other components within the vaccine are fairly normal as far as vaccines go. They're similar to flu vaccines, similar to shingles vaccines, in that they either stabilize the vaccine itself during manufacturing or during storage, or they help with the solution to be less acidic or less basic, so it's less pain upon getting it injected into your arm. Those are the types of components that are in the vaccine, besides the mRNA and those things. So,
no, that's very helpful to know.
yeah. Any other additions to at least the allergic reactions part of it? Piggybacking on special populations, what about patients who maybe already had COVID disease?
So the studies did not exclude them, so they were included. The way of thinking about this is currently that if somebody has had COVID and they are out of COVID, they could certainly get the vaccine. My recommendations, and based on other studies as well, and the CDC recommendations in general, is to likely wait until the 90-day mark after they get over COVID. And the reason for that is bifold. Number one, they have immunity likely to cover them until 90 days already. And number two is we can prioritize their doses to somebody else who needs it until we have more vaccine to administer to everybody. So they could get it after they're done with COVID and they're over it, yes, but preferably wait until the 90-day mark or so after they're over the infection to be able to be vaccinated.
Yeah, thank you. Any other additions? So for the few patients, that might have a major complication, what happens for that? Like, are there places that it gets reported to, or anything like that? Do you guys have any information on that?
So the United States actually back in the 80s started a vaccination program that requires all serious side effects to be reported to them. If people have the 1 in a million serious side effect that may continue to cause trouble for them, or any other problems, there's actually a whole vaccine program with that. In this case, this is the same thing will happen. The federal government will pay you money and help pay for the expenses under what's called a countermeasure injury compensation program, which was developed after 9/11, actually in relation to anthrax and some of the other things we were having at that time. And so it pays, like I say, money to individuals to pay for healthcare costs or other costs, loss of work and that sort of thing, if you have a major injury from it. That's available on the government website if you're interested in looking at that with more details.
Every vaccine that anybody gets, with it gets an important piece of education called VIS, or Vaccine Information System, and that every kid who gets vaccinated, their parents get it. On that document, there's a number for the federal government reporting of adverse effects, and the system is called Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, or VAERS. So I would encourage anybody who believes they got a side effect from the vaccine to report it, because that's how we learn and that's how we know. Of course, as Dr. Wagner mentioned, if it's a serious enough side effect, there is a mechanism to compensate folks, and that's called National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, or VICP as well, in addition to what Dr. Wagner has just mentioned. So there are frameworks in place to assist people who get adversely affected seriously.
Yeah. Thank you.
One of the few contraindications we didn't talk about, Dr. Haddad, that perhaps you can expand upon is anybody who has had Guillain-Barre from vaccines in the past. It's pretty rare, and it's more common just seen in association with illnesses. So perhaps you can expand on that.
Guillain-Barré is believed to be an autoimmune disorder that attacks one's own neural cells or nervous system to cause transient paralysis. And it is common after certain infections, one of which is Campylobacter, but other viruses can cause Guillain-Barré, such as Zika or flu. In fact, COVID itself has been associated with clusters of Guillain-Barré, specifically in France and northern Italy in March and April when they had a surge. So with that, some vaccines are also associated with Guillain-Barré, although the association is very, very smaller. Like the 1976 swine flu vaccine is the example we give for that, but that has changed since then. So somebody who has had a vaccine-associated Guillain-Barré syndrome, we like to avoid further vaccination. That is the only restriction at this point. Otherwise, if it's natural Guillain-Barré and they're doing fine, that's not an absolute contraindication.
Thank you for that insight. So we're getting kind of towards the end of our conversation, but where would you guys suggest people go if they want to learn more? Where can they get reliable information from? What would you guys suggest people to point people towards?
For me, I always provide the CDC as a great resource. In fact, you know, I come from a different area of the world. I'm a citizen here, but it's my country too. And it just gives me so much pleasure to see every other country refer to the CDC for guidance. You know, despite what people say about the conspiracy theories and the big government and so forth, I think the CDC is out there to help. I think their intentions are scientifically based. They're not biased, and I would definitely refer them. Number one, they can also go to the European CDC. It's called ECDC. Or if somebody wants to check the Chinese CDC, there's also a Chinese CDC. But definitely the US CDC is an amazing tool for that.
And I'd like to give them credit because in the past, it's been a lot of words on their website and sometimes at a level where I don't understand, but they now have some really clear, very helpful, both graphics and sort of patient information that frankly, I find is helpful to read as anything else. So they've done a really nice job, I think, giving honest, accurate information at a level that all of us can understand.
What makes it special, as you said, is there's an entry for healthcare professionals with the more technical wording and description, but there's also an entry for regular people for them to understand medical stuff at a really easy level. So there are multiple venues within the same website.
Any other additions?
My just take home point to everybody is, you know, it's scary, perhaps to some of you, and you want to wait until your colleagues get it, perhaps, but just think that at least in both the Moderna and Pfizer studies, at least in phase 3, for Pfizer, it was like over 40,000 for phase 3 participants, and for Moderna, over around 30,000. So we did trial it for you. You're not the first, and you won't be the guinea pig. So feel assured with that. And thanks to the trial phase 1 and 2 people. So
yeah, that's great. And I'll plug for at least Covenant employees. They can also find information on the Covenant intranet site. There's a COVID-19 vaccine website that they can. There's links to the CDC and those sites, as well as some just information for them. I'll open it up just for any closing remarks, any last bits of information or anything that you might want to just, what's the very bottom line takeaway points?
Well, I'm really excited to be able to get the vaccine. I've been incredibly careful. I have family members who are high risk. So I am one of those who's been literally even wearing a mask at home in my own house to try to protect people. So I'm excited about this. It doesn't mean I'm going to not have to wear a mask when I'm out and about or not have to wear a mask when I'm in the emergency department. Clearly, I need to still continue to take good care to not pass things around, because this doesn't promise that I can't be a carrier, but it will at least keep me from getting an illness, and I'll be part of the group of people that protects those who may or may not be able to get the vaccine. So I'm excited to get that started.
Anything else?
I would encourage people to embrace it. We need at least 2 or 3 out of 4 people to get it to be effective, to produce this herd immunity, at least 66 to 70% of people. And I'd like to close by saying I would prefer, again, to get part of the virus to induce my immunity rather than the whole package. So, Dr. Khan?
Yeah, finally, this is a global problem, and even if you don't know someone personally or have friends of friends that have had COVID with serious or not serious consequences, this is a huge burden on our hospitals and our colleagues, my colleagues, friends, families that are really struggling every day at work, and we need to do our part. So I really encourage you all to get the vaccine.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you doing this, sharing some of your wisdom and your knowledge, and I know it'll help a lot of people, and hopefully will sway some people into feeling comfortable with getting the vaccine. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Dad and Dr. Wagner for their work. I'm sure they've just been running around the past couple of weeks like crazy getting the word out.
Thank you, everybody. It's good.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Yes, you too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.